Today, I'm going to be teaching you all a little bit about transport layer security, specifically the TLS 1.2 handshake released in 2008 and still used widely across the internet. But before we jump into the details of how exactly the TLS handshake works, we're going to take a little bit of a step back and learn how did we get here and why did anyone ever come up with TLS in the first place? As detailed in a book written by Nick Caldry, the World Wide Web protocols that link hypertext documents into a working system was conceived in 1989, released to the public in 1991, and began entering everyday use in 1993 to 94. Alongside this growing everyday use of the internet and the World Wide Web came a motivation to secure the communications that were becoming commonplace. These communications can be simply thought of as moving data between 2 points, and there is always a fear that someone not intended to receive the data is waiting at one end of these points looking to read, collect, and/or modify this data. Thus came the public release of Secure Sockets Layers, also known as SSL, in 1995, as a method to encrypt data and authenticate the connections between your computer and whichever server you're trying to reach. Born from this development in 1995 came Transport Layer Security, also known as TLS, in 1999, at the time thought to be a direct upgrade to SSL 3.0 as it proved to be a more secure option. SSL and TLS in the modern era are commonly used interchangeably to describe the process of securing an internet connection by encrypting data between a server and a browser, or between two servers. So that's great and all, but what are the benefits of using TLS, you may be asking? Well, TLS and SSL have three primary benefits, that of authentication, confidentiality, and integrity. The process generally begins with authentication. We want to make sure that our data is being sent to and received by the correct server. This process is generally accomplished through the use of certificates, which we will discuss in some detail later. The second benefit is going to be confidentiality. Once the process of authentication is done, the server and your computer are now going to possess a session key that allows both sides to encrypt the data they are sending back and forth between one another, with only these two parties being able to unencrypt them, making sure that as your communications go through the different points to reach one another, third parties are unable to discern the contents of the messages. The third benefit of TLS is going to be integrity. Alongside encryption in the modern era, it is not uncommon, and indeed best practice, to include a message authentication code, also known as a MAC. This MAC allows the recipient of the encrypted message to make sure that the data has not been modified, and if it has been, they'll be able to tell, thus ensuring the integrity of the data. This is a concern because although bad actors won't be able to discern the contents of the encrypted message, they can still alter the encrypted message itself. Now, all of this sounds fine and dandy. However, there has to be some downsides, right? Well, not any downsides that outweigh the benefits that TLS and SSL provide. Two downsides to keep in mind are that 1. When you're attempting to encrypt your data and send it along, this process does introduce some level of latency to communications, although to most, this would be imperceptible. And secondly, as with all things security, TLS is not perfect, and it is constantly being iterated upon, as it has been in the past, in order to combat and counter bad actors out there who are attempting to defeat the security benefits that TLS provides to all of us as we use the internet. Now that we understand a bit about the strengths and weaknesses of TLS, as well as the impetus for its development, we can finally learn how the TLS handshake actually works. Except that we have to introduce just a little bit more foundational information before jumping into it. To understand the TLS handshake, we need to have a decent grasp on what exactly is a certificate as provided by certificate authorities, and what is the diffie-hellman key exchange algorithm. To begin understanding a certificate, we need to understand that there are certain companies that have been designated as trustworthy, and these companies, called certificate authorities, use public key cryptography, which essentially just means that there is a public key that the whole world is allowed to know that can decrypt any messages encrypted via a private key that only the owner possesses and should never ever be released to the public. Through this public key encryption, certificate authorities have their own certificates that are pre-installed on every single device that you own, and on these certificates exists the certificate authority's public key. We simply trust that these certificates are true and that these public keys provided are trustworthy. Now that we understand who certificate authorities are, we can come to understand that they are the foundation for establishing trust between our computers and servers elsewhere in the world. All important websites that you visit on a daily basis are going to have a certificate provided by one of these certificate authorities. And on these certificates, there's going to be a signature signed by the certificate authority using their very secret private key. that we can unencrypt to verify its authenticity using the public key that is pre-downloaded on everyone's devices to essentially verify that this is a legitimate certificate for the website we are attempting to connect to. Once we have verified the signature, we can then trust the public key provided on, let's say, Amazon.com certificate and use this trusted public key from Amazon to decrypt any message that Amazon sends encrypted with their private key. This process is key to the authentication goal of the TLS process, making sure that we are connected to who we want to be connected to. As for a little bit about diffie-hellman key exchange algorithm, essentially all you need to know about this is that in this exchange, both parties are able to share information with one another publicly, yet once each side receives the public information from the other, they can share a secret that no one else besides the two of them can realistically know. This is important because it allows your computer and the server you're trying to connect to create a symmetrical key, also known as a session key, that can be used to encrypt and decrypt information very efficiently, thus making future communications secure and fast. This can also be described as using asymmetric cryptography to generate a symmetric cryptography key, which is more efficient and faster to use to share further information. Now that we have all of that out of the way, let's learn how the TLS handshake works. To begin, it takes you or any other user deciding that they want to connect to a server somewhere in the world. Once you have decided that you want to connect to, let's say, Amazon.com or your bank's website, the process begins. At first, once you type in the URL address, your computer, also known as the TLS client in this case, is going to send a client hello message. This is simply letting whatever server hosting the website you want to connect to know that you are interested in creating an authenticated channel to share information. In response, the server is going to send back its own greeting, known as a server hello, alongside its own personal certificate and its half of the diffie-hellman key exchange. This is done in its server key exchange message. At this point, we aren't concerned about bad actors collecting the data that is being shared between your computer and the server. However, we are concerned that a bad actor could modify the server key exchange message. Recall, the public information being shared in the diffie-hellman key exchange. Because if it were to be imperceptibly modified, then a bad actor could later read our encrypted information. Thus, this server key exchange is signed with, let's say, Amazon's private key, to which we have the trusted public key from Amazon as we determined through the certificate process, which lets us know that if we can verify the signature, we know that the diffie-hellman key exchange message has not been modified. Once your computer has the server side of the diffie-hellman exchange and has verified that they received a legitimate certificate authenticating the recipient of our following message, your computer will send back their half of the diffie-hellman key exchange in the form of a client key exchange message. Additionally, your computer, having both sides of the key exchange, is now in possession of the session key and can send along a change cipher spec message, basically saying to the server, every message from now on is going to be encrypted using the session key. Once you receive my half of the diffie-hellman key exchange, please only send back encrypted messages. To which the server will respond with its own change cipher spec message, letting your computer know it understands and will from now on only send messages using the encryption being done with the symmetric key. From this point on, the handshake is complete. Your computer and the server have a secure authenticated channel through which both sides can freely exchange data about anything you want, as it is all encrypted with the session key and sent alongside a MAC, which, as discussed earlier, maintains the integrity of the messages, letting both sides know whether the message has been altered in transition or not. Finally, it's important to understand that, let's say, Amazon.com still doesn't know who you are or who your computer is, just that you and the server have an authenticated and secure channel to exchange information through. Now, Amazon or your bank will likely ask for you to log in or something akin to this so it can know that it's safe to send you sensitive information. So I know, all of this sounds awesome, but what are the practical applications of TLS? Well, if you've ever seen an HTTPS URL, which I'm sure you have as there's been a massive push to mainly use HTTPS, then you know that TLS is being used all around us, and you are engaging with it essentially every time you get on any website that's important. HTTPS uses TLS connection as a security layer to encrypt data over the network and protect communications between a web server and a browser. TLS is also used in other protocols across the web, such as Network News Transfer Protocol, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, File Transfer Protocol, and more. That's all. I hope you found this video insightful and enjoyed learning about TLS alongside me.